The city hummed like it always did, horns in the distance, footsteps on pavement, voices rising and fading with the wind. Maya moved through it with practiced rhythm, balancing her sketchbook under one arm and a coffee she always forgot to drink in the other. Her tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn smelled like turpentine and cinnamon, a strange but comforting blend. There were canvases on every wall, unfinished, wild, and aching to be seen. She stood barefoot in front of the biggest one, fingers stained with charcoal, forehead creased in quiet focus. This was the piece she would finally exhibit, the one that made her feel seen even before anyone else laid eyes on it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Liam. "Good luck today, love. I'm proud of you." She smiled, letting the words soak in for just a second too long. He had a way of writing things that felt warmer than when he said them aloud. Maya had grown used to filling in the emotional gaps he often left behind, assuming his silences meant support, that his tiredness came from loving her in quiet ways. In the beginning, that was enough. Now, she wasn't sure what it was. They had met at an open mic night 2 years earlier. He played the guitar like someone trying not to cry. She drew him without asking that night, capturing the slump of his shoulders and the storm behind his eyes. He had kissed her in the rain after his second song, tasting like whiskey and apology. Back then, even his chaos felt romantic. The night before her exhibition, they ordered Thai food and ate on the floor, their backs against the couch, her feet resting on his lap. Liam was quiet, scrolling on his phone between bites, and she assumed it was nerves, hers maybe mirrored in him. "You'll come tomorrow, right?" she asked. He nodded without looking up. Wouldn't miss it. She told herself that was enough, that the nod meant something. After all, he knew how much this meant to her, how hard she had fought to find a gallery that didn't want to fit her into a cliché. She had poured herself into that canvas like it could hold all the years no one had listened. She believed he understood that. The next morning, Maya woke early and made tea, pacing her apartment barefoot as sunlight crawled through the blinds. She had 3 hours before the opening, and a part of her wanted to just stand there, staring at her work. One last time before the world saw it. Her phone was silent. No message. No missed calls. She showered slowly, styled her hair like she was dressing her courage, and sat down to paint a last stroke, just a small one. A secret only she would notice. She felt her chest tighten, like something invisible had shifted. Still, she shook it off. Maybe Liam was sleeping in. Maybe he was writing her a song. She left the apartment with a folder of prints under her arm and the sound of the city buzzing in her ears. The gallery was already alive when she arrived. People hanging lights, moving walls, sipping from cheap coffee cups with urgent smiles. Maya placed her painting on the easel with trembling fingers and exhaled. She tried calling him once, then twice, straight to voicemail. Her stomach flipped. Maybe his phone died, maybe he got caught in the subway. She told herself anything but the truth she hadn't named yet. She stood in the center of the gallery, smiling at strangers, her eyes darting to the door every 3 minutes. The first hour passed. Then another. He didn't show. Not even a text. Not even a lie. Maya stood by her painting, receiving compliments with nods and forced laughter. Her heart kept sinking through her chest until it settled somewhere cold behind her ribs. She smiled through it all, pretending to be whole. That night, back in her apartment, she found the sweater he had left, and beside it, tucked under a book, his iPad unlocked, open, as if he had wanted her to find it. A message at the top of the screen read, "Last night was a mistake, but I can't stop thinking about you." The name wasn't hers. She didn't cry. She didn't throw anything. Maya simply sat on the edge of her bed, holding his phone like it had burned her. Her body went still in that moment, like grief had frozen her from the inside. The tea from that morning was still on the counter, cold, untouched. She stared at her own reflection in the dark window, unsure who she was anymore. The girl who believed in soulful musicians and messy kisses in the rain had vanished. All that remained was a woman who had bled herself onto canvas, while the person she trusted most walked away with pieces of her. She sent one message, "Don't come back," and then she blocked his number, like she was erasing a ghost. Her exhibition went on without her name attached. She told the gallery to remove it. She didn't want applause for something that felt like a betrayal now. She needed silence. Space. For 2 days, she didn't eat, didn't answer texts, didn't paint. Her apartment felt too full of memories she no longer wanted to carry. Every brushstroke she looked at reminded her of his voice behind her, whispering critiques, pretending to help, quietly draining her spark. Then, on the third morning, she opened her sketchbook and ripped out every page. The sound was sharp, violent, final, and when she reached the last one, blank and waiting, she wrote 3 words in the corner: no more compromise. That was her vow, her line in the sand. She packed a duffel bag with jeans, notebooks, a single-framed photo of her mother, and left the apartment key on the kitchen counter. Maya didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to go. The city no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage she didn't audition for. Scrolling through listings that night, her eyes landed on a small house by the coast in a town she'd never heard of. Westerhaven, a place where no one knew her name or her heartbreak. She booked it instantly, heart pounding, as if escaping meant breathing again. Outside, it started to rain. The kind of rain that once felt romantic, like movie scenes and slow dances on rooftops. Now it just sounded like static. Noise. Maya sat by the window watching it fall, wondering how something so soft could feel so violent when you're already breaking. The bus rolled into Westerhaven under a silver sky, the kind that looked like it hadn't decided whether to cry or shine. Maya stepped off with her duffel bag and a head full of silence, greeted only by the scent of salt and old wood. The town felt untouched by time. Small stores with chipped signs, porches with creaky swings. No one looked twice at her, and that felt like mercy. She walked 3 blocks to the little house she'd rented. White shutters peeling paint, a front yard with grass that didn't care. The key was under the mat just like the email said. Inside, the walls were bare. The air smelled faintly of lemon and dust. She dropped her bag, stood in the doorway, and listened to the sound of her own breathing. That first night she didn't unpack. She made toast, sat on the floor with a blanket around her shoulders, and stared out the window. The sea was just a glimpse beyond the rooftops, dark and endless. The silence wasn't comforting yet, but at least it wasn't filled with memories. It was neutral. The next morning, Maya wandered the town with her hood up, notebook tucked under one arm. She passed a bakery, a post office, a flower shop with sunflowers in a tin bucket. The streets were clean, unhurried. A couple of locals nodded at her. She didn't nod back. Not yet. Not ready. She found a small grocery store and picked up fruit, tea, crackers. The cashier was a woman in her 50s who asked, "You just move in?" Maya nodded. "House by the cliff," the woman added. "Good view, bad plumbing." Maya smiled politely, then left before more conversation could happen. Back home, she unpacked one bag and left the others. She placed her mother's photo on the windowsill, facing the sea. The rest of the day she tried to draw, but her hand froze over the page. She ended up sketching waves that looked more like walls. Everything came out heavier than she meant. Days passed. Maya fell into a pattern. Morning walks, quiet meals, aimless sketches. She stopped checking her phone entirely. The house creaked at night like it had secrets to tell. She didn't ask. She liked pretending it had lived through worse, and could keep her hidden, just long enough to rebuild. On Thursday, the sky was clearer, so she took her notebook and wandered farther. That's when she saw the bookstore. Harbor pages, painted navy blue with a bell above the door. Inside, the light was warm and golden, and the smell of coffee and old paper wrapped around her like a scarf. She browsed aimlessly, not really reading. The titles. A small chalkboard near the counter read, "Buy a book, get a free cup of calm." Behind the counter stood a man with rolled-up sleeves and a pencil behind his ear. He didn't look up until she stepped closer. Then he said, "You don't look like you're from here." Maya blinked. "Is it that obvious?" "You're wearing boots meant for city sidewalks," he said, pouring coffee into a paper cup. "And that notebook looks like it's seen subway fights." She almost laughed. Almost. "Ethan," he added, offering the cup without asking what she wanted. "It's free with your first existential crisis." She took the cup. "Thanks. I'm Maya." "Nice to meet you, Maya, not from here," he replied. She stood there a beat too long, unsure what to say next. "Let me know if the silence gets too loud. I stock poetry for that." His voice was calm, lightly sarcastic, like he didn't care if she stayed or left. That made her stay a little longer. She picked a book at random, paid in cash, and left. Outside, the wind tugged at her jacket, and she pulled it tighter. She hadn't expected to meet someone like him. Not charming, in a practiced way, but grounded, dry, observant. He hadn't looked at her like she was broken. Just knew. 2 days later, she ran into him again. This time at the farmer's market by the pier. He was holding a paper bag of apples, arguing with an old woman about which ones made better pie. Maya was just passing through, but he caught her eye and smirked. "Are you following me now?" She tilted her head. "Clearly, you're the one stalking my grocery habits." "Touché," he said, then walked past her with a lazy wave. That was it. No invitation, no small talk, just a brief spark in the middle of an otherwise gray morning. She kept walking, but her fingers brushed the spine of the book she had bought from him, still unread. Later that week, she saw him again, this time seated alone outside the coffee shop across from the bookstore, scribbling in a notebook. He didn't look up when she passed. She wondered what he was writing. Something clever, probably. Something she'd want to read and pretend didn't affect her. Back at home, she finally read the first line of the book he'd sold her. It was, underlined, "Sometimes to heal, you have to stop telling yourself you're fine." She closed it quickly, as if the words had spoken out loud. Her throat tightened. She wasn't fine. Not yet. But maybe fine was overrated. That night she dreamed of waves again. But they weren't crashing. They were still, almost frozen, as if waiting for permission to move. She woke with her hand resting over her chest, breath shallow. It was the first time she hadn't dreamed of Liam since arriving in Westerhaven. The next morning, she found herself outside Harbor Pages again. She didn't go in, just stood there across the street, watching people come and go. A girl with freckles, a boy carrying flowers, a dog tied to a bike rack. The normalcy felt foreign, like a language she used to speak but had forgotten. Ethan stepped out just then, holding a cup of coffee in a paper bag. He looked across the street and spotted her. No wave this time, just a tilt of his head almost, like a question. She hesitated, then turned and walked away, her boots clicking softly against the cobblestone path. She didn't look back, but for the first time since leaving New York, the silence around her didn't feel heavy. It felt open, like the pause between notes in a song, like something waiting to begin. That night, as she sat on her porch with a blanket and tea, she finally drew something. Maya sat across the street from the cafe, sketchbook balanced on her knee, pencil gliding slowly over the page. She didn't mean to draw him. It just happened. Ethan was there again, writing in his notebook, one foot tapping absent-mindedly. His shoulders were relaxed, his hair messy from the wind. She started with his hands. There was something about the way he held the pen, like every word had weight. Maya's lines followed the slope of his jaw, the crease in his brow, the quiet intensity behind his stillness. She wasn't drawing him to keep him. She was drawing to understand why he kept appearing in her mind. why the silence felt louder. Near him, she didn't show the sketch to anyone. Not even herself, really. She closed the book and went home before he noticed. That night she couldn't stop thinking about how easy it was to draw him. As if her hands knew something her heart hadn't said out loud. She stared at the ceiling for hours. The next morning she drew again. Waves, clouds, hands reaching for something out of frame. She didn't care if it made sense. She just kept going. Her little kitchen table was covered in charcoal smudges and crumpled paper. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like a ghost in her own story. Later that afternoon, she walked into Harbor Pages and found Ethan restocking shelves. He glanced up, then back to the book in his hand. "You again?" he said. "Don't tell me you're here for more tea and emotional support poetry." She grinned despite herself. Actually, maybe just the poetry today. He led her to the back section where the shelves were older and dustier. "This one has bite," he said, handing her a slim book with torn edges. "Not everything has to whisper to hurt." She turned it over in her hands. "You always recommend things like, 'You know what people need,'" she said. "Do I?" He leaned against the shelf, watching her with an expression that didn't need words. Maybe. She didn't thank him. She just took the book and followed him to the counter. As he rang it up, he asked, "Do you draw every day?" Maya blinked. "Sometimes, when it's quiet enough to hear myself." He didn't push. Just nodded, like her answer made perfect sense. "You should stop by the cafe on Wednesdays. Open table for artists in the back." She raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know I'd want that?" He shrugged. "I don't. I just think sometimes people need a place to sit down and exist." Maya didn't say yes or no. She just left with the book, heart ticking strangely fast. That night, she sat on her porch again, sketching the outline of a coffee cup, a hand holding a pen, a half smile she remembered from earlier. She kept shading long after the lines were done. A few days later, she passed by the pier and saw Ethan helping an old man unload boxes from a truck. He didn't talk much, just listened, nodded, and carried the weight without making a scene. Maya stood behind a lamppost, watching him like someone studying a language she hadn't learned yet. He was good at being present, not loud, not performative, just quietly there. She saw how people leaned into him when they spoke, how he didn't interrupt or fill silence with empty words. It made her wonder if she had ever truly been heard like that, if Liam ever knew how to sit with her without trying to fix her. That thought stayed with her as she walked home. She picked up her sketchbook, opened to a blank page, and began drawing two figures on a bench, one speaking, the other just listening, hands folded, face turned gently to the side. It wasn't Ethan. Not exactly. But it felt like something. Close. The next morning she found herself outside the cafe again. This time she went in. Ethan was behind the counter, tying his apron. "Let me guess," he said. "You've come to criticize the poetry selection." She smiled. "I actually came for the seat in the back, the artist one, if it's still open." He gestured dramatically. "It's yours, on one condition." She waited. "You let me see what you're drawing sometime." Maya paused, pretending to think. "That depends. Do you judge harshly?" He smirked. "Only myself. Everyone else gets grace." She didn't answer, just walked to the back table. She sketched in bursts, sipping slowly from a cup of tea that tasted like ginger and secrets. Around her, voices buzzed softly, locals greeting each other, a kid giggling over a muffin, a dog snoring under a chair. It felt like being inside a life she hadn't built, but was being quietly invited into. Ethan passed by once, twice, never hovering. Just checking in. On the third round, he left a napkin on her table. On it was scribbled, "Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers." She traced the letters with her fingertip, unsure if he wrote that for her or just for anyone who needed. 2 hours slipped by. When she finally looked up, the cafe was nearly empty. Ethan was sweeping near the door. "You were in a trance," he said as she packed up. "Didn't want to break it." She tilted her head. "You believe in that?" "Creative trances?" He leaned on the broom. "I believe in not interrupting what's working." Outside, the air smelled like ocean and fresh bread. They walked in the same direction for a block without planning it. Maya spoke first, surprising herself. "I used to be in love with someone who didn't know how to sit still or listen." Ethan glanced at her but didn't say anything. She continued walking. That was the moment she realized it. She was talking about Liam, out loud, to someone new. She hadn't planned it, hadn't rehearsed it. It slipped out like breath, and Ethan didn't pry or react. He just walked beside her, hands in his pockets, allowing the moment to be what it was, small but honest. At the corner, she turned left. He kept straight. "Good night, Maya, not from here," he called. She looked over her shoulder. "Good night, Ethan, with the napkin wisdom." He smiled, and for the first time, she didn't feel like a visitor anymore. She felt like part of a sentence that hadn't finished yet. Maya woke up with the urge to draw before coffee, before brushing her hair, before anything. Her hands moved with urgency, charcoal lines filling the page in minutes. A seagull mid-flight. A woman seated alone at a window, a hand outstretched to no one. It wasn't about beauty. It was about breath. She filled 3 pages before the kettle even whistled. The sketches weren't planned, just felt. It was as if something dormant had cracked open, and now every line was a sigh she hadn't let. Her self-release. She stood over the table, palms smudged black, heart strangely light. Later that day, she stopped by Harbor Pages, not for a book, but just to walk past it. Ethan spotted her through the window and waved her in. "Hey," he said, brushing flour off his hands. "We're hosting a local art night next Friday. Small crowd, no pressure. Thought you might like it." Maya hesitated. "Is it a showing?" "More like a gathering," he replied. "People share whatever they're working on. Poetry, paintings, music, no judgment, just process." She looked at him closely. "Are you performing?" He chuckled. "God, no. I'm just handing out tea and pretending I know what I'm doing." She almost said no, but something in his smile made her nod. "All right, I'll come." "Cool," he said, already turning to help another customer. It wasn't a date, it wasn't anything, but her chest buzzed a little anyway. That night, she worked late into the evening, sorting through her sketches. On Friday, the bookstore glowed with low lights and soft jazz, pillows on the floor, a projector showing black and white photos on a wall. Maya sat near the back, notebook in her lap, heart in her throat. She hadn't shown anyone her work since New York, since him. This felt terrifying and freeing. She didn't present, just observed. Watched a girl read a poem about her grandmother's garden. Watched a boy play a violin that trembled slightly in his grip. The room was warm with gentleness. Ethan moved quietly among them, pouring tea, offering a word here, a nod there. Maya sketched his shadow. After the event, she stayed to help stack. "Chairs?" Ethan handed her a mug of leftover chai and leaned against a shelf. "Thanks for coming," he said. "You didn't run, that's a good sign." She took a sip. "You were right. No judgment, just stories. I liked that." He smiled. "Told you." She started coming to the bookstore more often, Sometimes just to read, sometimes just to sit. The silence between them grew comfortable, almost companionable. They didn't flirt. They didn't define anything. But there was a quiet rhythm, forming like the slow pulse of a tide pulling in. One afternoon, Maya arrived early and saw Ethan outside talking to a woman. She was pretty in that effortless long hair, knowing smile kind of way. Her hand touched his arm when she laughed. Maya stopped mid-step, something cold and sharp blooming in her chest. She looked away before he saw. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe they were old friends. Maybe it didn't matter. But she walked slower that day, took the long way around the block before going inside. When she entered, Ethan was at the counter alone, looking at his phone. "Hey," he said. "You, all right?" She nodded too quickly. The next day she couldn't concentrate. Her lines were too tight, her shading uneven. She drew the same face 3 times and still couldn't get it right. She tossed the paper aside, frustrated. It wasn't about the woman. Not really. It was about the fact that she felt something and didn't want to. Later, as she sat on a bench near the cliffs, sketchbook closed beside her, she admitted it. She liked him. Not in a thunderstorm, lose-your-mind kind of way, but in a soft, unfolding way that felt scarier, like she could grow into it, like it could hurt if she let it. She stared out at the sea, waves folding against the rocks like breaths too big to hold in. She hated that someone else could make her feel this much again, after everything, after Liam. She wrapped her arms around herself and whispered, "I wasn't supposed to want this." The following afternoon, Ethan found her reading in the corner of the cafe. "I made something new," he said, setting down a mug. "It's either a total failure or the best thing I've ever brewed. Want to test it?" She sniffed it suspiciously. "Smells like cloves and recklessness." He laughed. She took a sip and made a face. "Tastes like a warm punch in the gut." "Perfect," he said. "That's exactly what I was going for." She shook her head, smiling despite herself. He sat across from her, elbows on the table. "You've been quiet." Her smile faltered. "That's kind of my thing." He didn't press, just nodded. "Mine too." A pause, then he added, "Sometimes people talk too much and say nothing. You're the opposite." Maya looked down, unsure what to do with that. Compliments that weren't about appearance always landed harder. She tucked her hair behind her ear. For a moment, she wanted to tell him everything about Liam, the betrayal, the vows she made. But the words stuck like thorns in her throat. So she just asked, "Have you ever had to start over?" Ethan looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Yeah, twice. Both times I didn't think I could." Maya didn't ask what happened, just let the silence stretch between them like a thread. She stared at his hands, the way they wrapped around the mug, steady and unassuming. She wanted to believe he was safe, but safety was unfamiliar territory now, and hope was a dangerous thing. When she got home, she sat at her kitchen table and sketched a figure sitting alone at a table with another person watching them from across the room. No faces, just postures, stillness, and attention. She labeled, quietly, noticing. That night, Maya lay in bed, blanket pulled up to her chin, heart thudding in a confused rhythm. She wasn't in love, not yet. But she wasn't untouched either. Something had cracked, something small but real. And that, the next time Maya entered Harbor Pages, Ethan was alone, restocking a shelf with worn paperbacks. She walked slower, sensing something different in the air, quieter than usual, like a pause held too long. He looked up, and instead of greeting her with sarcasm, he asked, "Want to sit for a bit?" They sat at the reading table near the window, afternoon sun slanting in like gold threads across the floor. He didn't look at her when he spoke. I used to live in Boston, went to school there, thought I'd stay, build something. His voice was low, not regretful, just honest. Did you leave because of her? Maya asked before she could stop herself. Ethan gave a half nod. She had this idea of a life, corporate, fast, loud. I kept trying to keep up, wore the suit, smiled at the right moments, but I felt like I was faking every breath. Maya listened, not interrupting. He continued. Eventually, I stopped pretending, walked away. She said I quit on us. Maybe I did, or maybe I just stopped quitting on myself. There was no bitterness in his tone, just the weight of a choice made too late to fix anything. They were both quiet after that. Maya sipped her tea, staring at the rings on the table's wood grain. And here? She asked. He shrugged. Someone came with me once. Thought a slower life would be romantic. But turns out not everyone likes hearing crickets at night and not much else. She left? Maya asked gently. Ethan gave a small smile. She said I was too still, that people like me only work in stories. He looked at her then. But this place doesn't ask me to change. I think I needed that. Maya's chest ached with recognition. So did I, she almost said. For a flicker of a moment, she felt closer to him than ever before. Not because of what he'd said, but because he'd said it. Vulnerability wrapped in simplicity. But the closer she felt, the more exposed she became. And that old, familiar instinct kicked in. Protect. Pull back. Stay safe. That night she didn't sketch. She didn't sleep well either. The idea of him being hurt before, of someone walking away from the quiet, the calm, the honesty, it hit too close to home. She kept thinking, what if I become that person? What if I leave too, even if I don't mean to? The next few days she avoided the bookstore. She told herself she was busy, focused on her drawings, needed solitude. But it wasn't true. She was retreating, and she knew it. The distance felt like a decision she hadn't made out loud, but was making anyway. Ethan didn't text, didn't ask. He gave her space the way he gave her silence, without demand. That hurt more than if he had confronted her, because part of her wanted him to fight for her presence. Another part feared what that would mean if he did. One morning Maya walked by the shop and saw a new display in the window, a collection of art books arranged like an invitation. A note taped to the glass read, "You should be here. If not, that's okay too. No name, no pressure, just Ethan." She stood there for 5 whole minutes before walking on. Her chest felt heavy and light at the same time. She wanted to go in. She didn't. That evening, she cooked dinner alone and burned the rice. The house smelled like regret and overthinking. The next afternoon, as she was sketching near the cliffs, Ethan appeared without warning, hands in his pockets, wind tugging at his jacket. "Didn't mean to interrupt," he said. "Just figured this was the only place quiet enough to catch you." Maya closed her notebook slowly. "I've been distant," she said. "I noticed," he replied, not accusing, just stating, "but I figured you'd come back when you were ready." That made her throat tighten. She wanted to apologize, but also didn't know how. He saved her the effort. "Want to have dinner? Tomorrow?" She blinked. "Dinner?" He nodded. "Just food, not a proposal. You eat, I eat, same table, low stakes." She laughed despite the knot in her chest. "What if I say no?" "I'll probably eat alone and still make too much pasta," he replied, smiling softly. There was something in his tone, light but sincere. She didn't feel pressured. She felt offered, like trust, in portion sizes. Maya nodded slowly. Okay, tomorrow. Ethan smiled again, more in his eyes than his mouth. I'll bring wine, you bring yourself, we'll call it even. As he walked away, Maya stared at the sea, waves rising and falling like breath. She wondered if maybe the right people didn't try to fix your silence. They just waited inside it until you were ready to speak. She clutched her notebook close to her chest, heart beating louder than before. That night, she sat at her kitchen table and sketched two hands over a dinner table, reaching, but not touching. A candle between them, flickering, but steady. She titled it, not with words this time, but with a question mark in the corner. Like she was asking herself what came next. She didn't know the answer. Not yet. But the fear no longer screamed. It whispered. And in that softness, something else. Stirred, curiosity maybe, or hope dressed in a quieter coat. She closed her sketchbook, looked around the little house she'd once wanted to escape, and the restaurant was tucked between two art galleries with string lights hanging like stars caught in hesitation. Ethan was already at the door when Maya arrived, hair damp from the sea breeze, cheeks slightly flushed. Forgot the wine, he said, holding up empty hands. But I figured we could pick one that fits the night. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. What does tonight feel like? He looked at her for a beat longer than necessary. Something red, a little unpredictable. Inside, the host led them to a corner table by a window. The room glowed amber, the hum of conversation around them soft but alive. The menu was handwritten, the tablecloth slightly crooked. Maya liked it. It felt honest. They ordered pasta and shared a basket of bread while waiting for the wine, a Cabernet that tasted bold but patient. Ethan raised his glass. To not knowing where things are going but showing up anyway. They talked about everything but themselves. Movies they misquoted, books they never finished, favorite childhood. Meals. Maya laughed more than she expected. Her body relaxed into the chair like it had permission. There was no pressure to impress, no need to guard the edges of her thoughts. When the pasta came, she twirled hers slowly, savoring the warmth. This is better than I thought it'd be, she said. Ethan grinned. That's usually the secret to good things. They surprise you after you lower your expectations. She gave him a look. Was that about the pasta or the night? He sipped his wine. Maybe both. The lights flickered once as thunder rumbled in the distance. Outside, the wind picked up, pulling at the restaurant's curtains through the half-cracked window. A few people looked up, murmuring about the storm rolling in earlier than forecasted. By the time they finished dessert, rain had begun tapping at the windows with growing urgency. Ethan checked his phone. Looks like it's hitting harder near the coast. Maya's brow lifted. Isn't that where you live? He nodded. Yeah. And I'm about to regret not fixing that window last weekend. She looked at him. My place is closer. Less flood-prone, I think. Unless you want to risk your books floating away. He raised an eyebrow. Tempting, but I prefer reading them dry. They grabbed their coats, Maya holding her bag tightly. To her side as wind howled outside. They ran the 3 blocks to her house in near silence, laughing once when a gust nearly blew Ethan's umbrella inside out. By the time they reached her porch, both were drenched, hair sticking to skin, shoes squelching on the steps. She fumbled with the key, hands trembling from cold and something else. Once inside, the door slammed behind them like punctuation. Maya dropped her bag, heart racing. Ethan stood near the entrance, water dripping from his jacket onto the floor. You weren't kidding about the closer part, he said, breathless. She pointed to the bathroom. Towels. Second shelf. The eye. Wind screamed against the windows like a warning. But inside, the warmth began to build. Maya changed in her room, slipping into dry clothes. soft cotton shorts and an oversized sweatshirt that draped past her hips. She stood in front of the mirror for a moment, exhaling, centering herself. When she stepped out, Ethan was sitting on the floor, towel around his shoulders, flipping through a book from her shelf. She tossed him a dry towel and gestured to the folded sweatshirt in her hand. "I sleep in big shirts," she said casually. "No, they're not from exes. I buy them." He raised an eyebrow, amused. "You know that's exactly what someone with a closet full of ex-boyfriend shirts would say." She grinned. "Then I guess I'm suspicious by default." He took the sweatshirt and held it up. "If I put this on, I'll feel like a teenager. Stealing my boyfriend's hoodie." "You'll survive," she replied, turning on a low lamp in the corner. "Or you'll feel nostalgic and have emotional breakthroughs." He laughed, standing to remove the damp shirt beneath the towel. He slid the sweatshirt over his head, the hem falling mid-thigh. It made him look impossibly human. Time passed. Softly. They spoke little. The storm had become a background presence like percussion to their quiet symphony. Maya eventually disappeared into her room, door left half open. But she didn't sleep. The house felt different now. Every creak of wood had meaning. Hours later, she stepped into the hallway, drawn by something she couldn't name. She found Ethan standing near her art table, lit by the dim glow of the kitchen light. He was holding one of her sketches, one of him, sitting outside the cafe, lost in thought. "You look better in my clothes than I do," he said. She leaned on the door frame, smirking. That was the idea. He turned the page and held it up slightly. "You're really good. You make silence feel full." She walked closer, her eyes not leaving his. "That one was the first I did here. It opened something. After that, I couldn't stop." Ethan looked at her gently. "Why me?" Maya shrugged. "You looked like you were thinking about everything and nothing. That balance is rare." He set the sketch down. "You made me look better than I am." She tilted her head. "I drew what I saw. Maybe that says more about me." They stood, in silence for a beat, the air thickening between them. She was close enough now to smell the tea on his breath, to feel the warmth radiating from his skin beneath the borrowed fabric. Their shirts brushed, her hand lowered instinctivamente, brushing against the hem of his sweatshirt. His fingers grazed the edge of her sleeve, then slowly, reverently, slid down to rest on the side of her hip. There under the sweatshirt, he felt the softness of bare skin, just cotton, thin and unmistakable. Her breath hitched, sharp and quiet, and she didn't step back. The towel he still had wrapped around his waist loosened, slid to the floor without protest. The space between them disappeared. He leaned in, lips grazing the curve of her neck, breath hot and unsure. She tilted her head, eyes closing, a sigh escaping like a secret finally told. His lips met hers slowly, deeply, as if asking. Before every movement, her hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, not in desperation but in surrender. The storm outside cracked, thunder rolling like a drumbeat through the floor. Her body answered with heat. The kiss deepened, mouth searching, hands discovering, the shape of longing. There was no rush, only intention. His fingers traced the length of her spine through the fabric. Her skin trembled. She kissed him again, slower this time, as if sketching a memory she never wanted to fade. She guided him backward gently, their feet shuffling over the wooden floor, hearts racing in tandem. The candle still flickered nearby, casting shadows that danced across the walls like witnesses to something sacred. His mouth found her collarbone. Her knees nearly buckled. They didn't speak. Words would have cheapened it. They just moved, breathed, touched. She ran her hand through his hair, the fabric of his borrowed shirt brushing her thighs. He kissed her with gratitude, not hunger, like this was a moment earned by patience. In that instant, Maya understood something. Desire could be soft. It didn't have to shout or demand. It could whisper in the middle of a storm, ask for nothing but permission, and still leave her undone. Her body arched into him. She wasn't afraid, not tonight. The windows rattled with wind, but the world inside their skin was still. He lifted her slightly, fingers gripping the backs of her legs, and she wrapped around him with ease. It felt effortless, natural, like they had arrived at the same conclusion from different paths. She kissed his jaw, then his lips again as they reached the couch. They fell together, not clumsily, but like something that had been rehearsed in dreams. Skin on skin, warmth against warmth. They became color and shape, breath and thunder, heat and stillness. Outside, the rain poured harder, like a confession the sky had been holding back. Inside, she opened fully, silently, wholly. Her fingers on his chest, his name in the back of her throat. He held her like someone memorizing a language made only of touch. And as they moved together, in sync, in shadow, she imagined the image, burned onto a page, the softness of two bodies drawn in black and gray, the rhythm of rain, the curl of fingers, the echo of breath. A drawing she hadn't yet made but already loved. When her lips touched his again, slower now, steadier, the thought arrived uninvited but welcome. This is not where I lose myself. This is where I remember who I am. Under the storm, in his arms. With nothing but borrowed fabric between them, she finally understood. As thunder rolled one last time, deep and distant, Maya pressed her forehead to his. He exhaled, a smile ghosting over his lips. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded, eyes bright, breath shallow. This could make a beautiful drawing. He smiled. A storm of love. The morning light slipped through the blinds like a whispered apology from the night. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving puddles that shimmered in the early sun. Inside, the house was still, quiet in the way a place becomes sacred after something true is shared. The scent of rain lingered. Maya stirred slowly, limbs tangled, warmth and cotton. Ethan's arm was draped over her waist, his breath steady against her shoulder. Their shirts hung loose around them, but everything beneath was bare and honest. She didn't want to move. The world could wait. She turned, slightly, just enough to see his face, peaceful, almost boyish in the soft light. He looked younger when he slept, stripped of sarcasm and guarded glances. Her fingers brushed his hair back gently. He didn't stir, but his arm tightened around her instinctively. Sliding carefully out of his embrace, she wrapped a blanket around herself and padded into the kitchen. The floor creaked under her steps. She brewed coffee, the smell rising like a ritual. Her sketchbook waited on the table, pages fluttering as if it already knew. She sat and opened to a clean sheet, pencil in hand, before she even noticed. The drawing came quickly. A man curled around a woman, both wearing long shirts, lower bodies intertwined, inseparable yet distinct. It was tenderness, not lust. It was belonging without ownership. Maya shaded softly, capturing the slope of his back, the weight of her arm across his ribs. The bodies were connected, not by anatomy, but by stillness, the kind of stillness that held meaning. When she finished, she stared at it for a long time, then smiled. Footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway, shirt wrinkled, eyes sleep-heavy. "You drew me again, didn't you?" he asked, rubbing his neck. Maya shrugged. "Us, sort of." He leaned over her shoulder, eyes scanning the image. We look whole. She nodded. It felt like that. He kissed the top of her head and poured himself coffee. We should probably check the damage at my place later, he said. I'm betting my living room is now a shallow lake. She grinned, but her phone buzzed on the counter before she could respond. Her breath caught. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in weeks. Liam. One message. I'm in town. I need to talk to you, please. Her heart twisted, not in longing, but in weight. Ethan noticed the shift in her expression. You okay? He asked, already knowing it wasn't a yes. She set the phone down, eyes not leaving it. It's Liam. He's here. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but he stayed quiet. Maya turned. To him. I think this might be a good thing. A necessary thing, closure. He nodded, gaze steady. Want me to go with you? She shook her head. No, I need to face this myself. This is about untangling the past so I can actually move forward. Ethan didn't argue. He just walked to her, took her hand, and pressed a soft kiss to her. Knuckles. I'll be at my place cleaning what's left of the storm, she smiled faintly. Of your house or your heart? He smirked. Bit of both, but mostly the house. My heart's surprisingly intact this morning. She laughed, tension breaking for a moment. He stepped back, finishing his coffee. Come by when you're ready. I'll save your favorite towel and my shirts. Apparently they're magic. She followed him to the door, watching as he zipped up his jacket and stepped into the sunlight. The street glistened with renewal. He turned once before leaving, eyes meeting hers with silent promise. She lifted her hand in a wave, and then he was gone. Just like that. Maya leaned against the door, eyes closed. Her body still remembered him, every touch, every pause, every breath. But her mind now buzzed with the presence of Liam's message. The echo of what had been, trying to make itself known again. She got dressed slowly, choosing simplicity. Jeans, a black tee, no makeup. Just herself, no armor, no masks. As she tied her hair back, she looked in the mirror and whispered, Let's. In this right? The reflection didn't flinch. It just waited, calm and ready. Before leaving, she glanced one last time at her sketch on the table. It looked back at her like a memory already complete, like something that would stay, no matter what happened next. She placed it gently inside, her folder next to other pieces she wasn't ready to show. Outside, the sun was higher now, birds cutting across the pale blue sky like punctuation. The world had survived the night, and so had she. Maya took a breath deeper than usual and started walking toward her past, not to stay in it, but to finally leave it behind. Liam was already seated when Maya arrived, hunched over a mug of untouched coffee at the cafe near the harbor. He looked up as she entered, eyes scanning her like a puzzle he hadn't figured out. Hey, he said, standing too quickly. You look different. Good. You look good. She nodded politely, sitting across from him. The sunlight made his features sharper than she remembered. He smiled nervously, tapping his fingers on the table. I've been thinking about you, about us. I know I messed up, Maya, but I've changed, I swear. He spoke about therapy, about slowing down, about missing her every single day. His voice cracked once, the emotion raw, almost sincere. She listened, letting him speak without interruption. She didn't flinch, didn't soften, just heard him. When he finally stopped, Maya folded her hands in her lap and looked at him. Thank you for saying that, for owning it. Her voice was calm, steady. I believe you've changed, Liam. I really do. But I'm not the same girl. You left behind. His face fell, not in anger, but in understanding. So, that's it? She smiled gently. No. This is the end of what hurt, not the beginning of something again. He nodded slowly. I deserve that. You do, she said, her throat tight, but not from regret. They sat in silence for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just final. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. I forgave you a while ago. I just didn't know how much until now. He exhaled, tears welling but unshed. Thank you. She smiled. Goodbye, Liam. Outside, the air was crisp with early afternoon light. Maya walked away from the cafe with a strange lightness in her chest, like she'd set something heavy down without realizing it. Every step felt freer, more certain. The path ahead wasn't clear, but it was hers. When she reached Ethan's house, she found him hammering boards over a window, his back to the street. His shirt was damp with sweat, the air sawdust thick. She stood at the gate for a moment, watching. Then she stepped forward, boots crunching gravel. He turned at the sound, wiped his brow with his sleeve. His face lit up, not with surprise, but quiet relief. He walked to her without saying a word, wrapped his arms around her and held her tight. She melted into his chest, breathing him in like home. He kissed her, just a soft, sure press of lips. Nothing possessive, nothing asked. Then he turned and went back to his work. No questions, no explanations. Just space for her to be exactly where she was. Maya smiled, picked up a broom and began sweeping broken glass. They worked side by side, fixing what the storm had scattered. Wet books, fallen shelves, cracked wood panels. Her hair stuck to her face. His hands were scraped raw. But there was something beautiful in the mess, like rebuilding wasn't just practical but sacred. Ethan passed her nails and wood glue without speaking, and she responded with a nod or a quiet hum. Their rhythm returned, natural, unforced. At one point their fingers touched over a box of supplies. They didn't pull away, just paused, then kept going. By sundown, the place looked less broken, still messy, still imperfect. But theirs. Ethan ordered takeout, something spicy and messy. No romantic candlelight tonight, he joked, kicking off his boots. Just food and exhaustion. She laughed, flopping onto the couch. They ate on the floor again, shoulder to shoulder, sauce on their fingers, laughter echoing against freshly nailed boards. Maya hadn't laughed like that in years, mouth open, head back, full of life. And when Ethan leaned in this time, the kiss wasn't hesitant. It was sure. Clothes fell faster, bodies remembered. There was no thunder, no drama, just heat, intention, fire that had been simmering for too long. Ethan pulled her onto him like he'd been waiting since the day they met. She kissed him like a decision, not a question. The floor beneath them groaned and neither cared. Their breathing grew heavy, their touch rougher, needier. Hands grasped, lips traced, hips met with rhythm and force. There was no space left between them. No pause. Just surrender and sink. He whispered her name like it was an anchor. She gasped his like it was oxygen. They moved together like they were rediscovering something ancient. Each other, themselves. The truth of what it meant to be wanted and known. Maya pressed her forehead to his chest after, their bodies still tangled. His heart pounded steady beneath her cheek. We made a bigger mess this time, he said, breathless. She smiled. Yeah, but I think we needed to break something open. He kissed the side of her head. I don't care what gets broken, as long as we don't walk away again. She traced circles on his chest. I'm not going anywhere. That promise wasn't just for him, it was for herself, for the girl she used to be and the woman she'd become. They didn't clean up right away. They didn't rush to define it. They just stayed there, naked, tangled, whole. The world could wait. The future could take its time. Right now they had this. Each other. A mess. And something unspoken that finally felt real. The next morning, Maya woke to the sound of someone swearing softly in the kitchen. She padded out, barefoot, still wearing Ethan's oversized shirt. He stood in front of the fridge, holding an empty milk carton like it had betrayed him. "We're out," he said dramatically. She smirked. "And yet you live another day." He tossed the carton in the trash. "I was going to make pancakes. Now you'll never know my culinary genius." Maya leaned on the counter. "We've already had 2 nights of your genius. I'll survive." He laughed, turning on the kettle. As the coffee brewed, Ethan opened YouTube on his phone and connected to her speaker. "Mood music?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow. "If it's 2000s pop punk again, I'm leaving." He clicked play. A mellow acoustic song filled the room. "Compromise," he said, hands up. They ate toast with peanut butter and danced barefoot in the kitchen, the song looping in the background. It wasn't glamorous. It was real. Crumbs on the counter, dishes in the sink. But the way he looked at her while she sang off-key, that felt like everything. That afternoon, Maya sat at her art table, laptop open, folder full of scanned sketches, ready to send. Her finger hovered over the mouse. Ethan sat behind her, sipping tea. "You don't have to be ready," he said gently. She looked at him. "I'm not. But I want to be." She clicked send. The files uploaded, drawings of waves, silent storms, and him, each one born of change. Maya leaned back, exhaling like she hadn't in months. Ethan kissed her shoulder. "Proud of you." She closed her eyes. "Thank you for not asking me to rush." That night, as they folded laundry together, Maya looked at him mid-sock roll. "Why don't you bring some of your stuff here?" Ethan paused. "Like a toothbrush?" She nodded. "Or a drawer. Or 2. He smiled. "Careful. That's how empires begin." He brought his books first, then his mugs. One day he arrived with his records, another with his toolbox. It wasn't official, but it was obvious they were building something. Not just a shared space, but a life that didn't need permission to exist. They had days of spilled coffee and mismatched schedules, evenings of board games and quiet dinners. Sometimes they argued about where the spatula should go. Sometimes they fell asleep mid-movie, but the warmth never left, not even in silence. Maya kept drawing. The town inspired her. Its simplicity, its honesty, its sea. Ethan read next to her while she worked, occasionally glancing up to see her chewing the end of her pencil, completely focused. He never interrupted. He just watched, like she was art too. On rainy days they sat on the porch under blankets, listening to the water hit the roof. She sketched his profile in half light. He whispered stories he'd never told anyone. They didn't fill every second. They just let time happen. Together. One evening, Ethan was fixing a loose door hinge while Maya organized her portfolio. The email arrived just before dinner. The subject line read, "Interested in your work, possible collaboration." Her heart skipped. She opened it, hands trembling. It was from a small gallery in Vermont. One of her older college contacts had seen her new uploads and forwarded them. "We love the emotional clarity in your recent pieces," the email read, "especially the ones featuring human connection and solitude. Are you available to talk?" She stared at the screen, wide-eyed. Ethan walked in, saw her expression, and froze. What happened? She turned the laptop toward him. He read quickly, then looked up. "This is good, right?" She nodded slowly. It's more than good. It's real. He pulled her into a hug, arms wrapping around her waist. Told you, he said. The world was waiting. She leaned into him, eyes wet. I was afraid it had passed me by. He shook his head. Nah, you just had to catch up to yourself. Later that night, she sat with her sketchbook open to a new page. She began to draw, this time not from pain or fear or survival. She drew two people carrying boxes, laughter in lines, sunlight through windows, a kitchen with mismatched mugs. A beginning. Ethan came up behind her, arms slipping around her waist. He looked at the sketch and kissed her temple. That us? She nodded. Not now, someday soon. He smiled. Then I guess I better find my other sock. She laughed. We'll draw that day too. And when they went to bed that night, the house was still a little messy, the fridge still unevenly stocked, but everything felt settled. Not perfect. Not scripted. Just true. Ethan kissed her shoulder. Maya whispered, finally, and meant it. Maya stepped into Harbor Pages with her phone clutched tight, the email still open on the screen. Ethan was organizing a stack of new arrivals humming under his breath. She walked straight to him, heart racing. I need to show you something, she said, breathless. He looked up, catching the glow in her face before even seeing the screen. She held it out. His eyes scanned the message, widening with every line. They want to feature your work? He asked, barely containing his excitement. She nodded, cheeks pink. All of it. He laughed, loud and full, pulling her into his arms without hesitation. Right there between poetry shelves and coffee-scented air, he kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't cautious. It was real. People passed by, and she didn't care. For once, being seen felt like belonging. When he pulled back, she was smiling like the sun. Sorry, he said, breathless. That might have been unprofessional. She shook her head. That might have been perfect. Around them, the world moved on. But for a moment, they were everything still. They sat in the reading nook, knees touching, hearts louder than the room. When is it? He asked, still staring at her like she was made of stardust. Next month, she replied. They'll hang everything for the weekend. I'll need to be there a few days before. He took her hand gently. You'll crush it. She hesitated, then said quietly, Would you come with me? He blinked. Really? She nodded. It'd help to have someone who makes me feel like I already belong. And when it's over, I want a place to come home to. His expression softened, touched by the weight of what she meant. You have that. I'll be there. She leaned into his shoulder, breathing easier. Outside, leaves rustled. Inside, two people quietly agreed to walk side by side into whatever came next. The gallery trip became their first getaway together. The drive was filled with gas station snacks, roadside, music battles, and stolen glances at red lights. Ethan insisted on bringing her favorite mug. For grounding, he said. She rolled her eyes. You're ridiculous, he grinned. You love it. At the gallery, Maya's work was displayed on white walls with her name printed below. People stood in front of her drawings, tilting their heads, whispering things she never heard but somehow felt. Ethan watched her, not the art. That night, he told her, You're more than talented, you're true. They traveled again weeks later, this time to meet her mom. Maya was nervous, but Ethan charmed her within 5 minutes. They drank iced tea on a front porch and argued about music. Her mom pulled Maya aside and whispered, He's the calm you always needed. Later, they visited Ethan's family. His younger brother teased him relentlessly, and his father insisted Maya join them for backyard grilling. She laughed through old photo albums and held Ethan's hand beneath the table. That night, she told him, "This feels like storybook pages no one sees." The seasons turned. Winter brought quiet mornings with shared socks and cinnamon coffee. Spring meant long walks in watercolor skies. Summer was busy. Her art sold more, and he opened a second room in the store. Fall was their favorite. Scarves, rain, and porch light kisses. They fought sometimes. About dishes, about time, about nothing and everything, but they never let silence stretch too long. One always came back, always reached first. "It's not about winning," Ethan once said. "It's about not losing us." Maya drew more. She began illustrating stories for children and got her first publishing deal. Ethan read the drafts aloud, doing silly voices. She recorded him. Once. They posted it on YouTube and people loved it. "Should have been an actor," she told him. "Too late now," he replied. "You stole my spotlight." They had slow Sundays and messy Tuesdays. Grocery lists scribbled on receipts. Inside jokes whispered at crowded events. He knew when her silences meant pain and when they meant peace. She knew how to pull him out of his mind with just a look. They never rushed marriage, never needed to. But one day, as they painted the guest room, Ethan handed her a ring with paint still on his fingers. "Not because we need it," he said. "Just because I want to say yes to you every day." She said yes without hesitation. Their love wasn't loud. It didn't need fireworks or headlines. It lived in warm mugs, back rubs, shared playlists, and sleepy laughter under mismatched blankets. It grew in the spaces between everything else, the quiet places most people forget to water. Years passed. Her art bloomed. His store expanded. They adopted a dog that chewed their couch but stole their hearts. They traveled. They stayed in. They lived. Not a perfect life, but a real one. Full of choices made together hand in hand, and every time, Maya looked at him across the dinner table, or through the camera lens, or half asleep on the couch, she saw the same truth. Some storms don't come to destroy you. They come to clear the path. And Ethan, he had been the calm after everything. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. It walks in quietly, through the door of a bookstore, holding a cup of tea, asking nothing but offering everything. It doesn't fix you. It doesn't complete you. But it stands beside you while you remember how to complete yourself. Maya didn't fall in love the way she used to believe she would. Fast, reckless, desperate to be chosen. She chose instead. Chose to stay. Chose to open again. Chose to love. Without losing herself, Ethan never asked for more than she could give. But somehow she gave everything. Not all at once, but in glances, laughter, in mornings with toast and music on low. They didn't promise forever. They promised each day, one at a time. And in doing so, they built something better than a fairy tale. They built a life. Because sometimes the real love story isn't about finding someone who changes your world, but someone who makes you feel safe enough to change it yourself. And in a small house by the sea, with mismatched mugs and drying paint. She finally called. "At home,"